my voice will last long enough for me to preach a 3-hour sermon. I say that because if I can preach a 3-hour sermon, I'll be able to get through a 20-minute sermon. But there are several things I'd like to say before we go into the sermon this morning. First of all, there is on the table, if you have not received one, a listing of the videos that we're going to be showing at the 10 o'clock, beginning next Sunday morning. I told somebody this past week that I was going to start some of these videos, and I feel that the number one problem that we're facing in the world today is the teaching of evolution. I feel that way, and I have felt that way for quite some time. But I think the second problem, and I think there'll be some of you that might agree with me, would be the attack that we have of the Christian heritage of our nation. The secular world is trying to take Christ out of what has happened and so forth. And you will see that there is basically following the same the theme that we had last year. We're going to go through a series of videos on the creation. Some of the questions there that are asked many times, is Genesis still a relevant passage of Scripture today? I'm not going to do any answering. And then the second is the Wall Builders has the 26th session on the foundation of the world. I don't know, I haven't gotten these yet. I will be getting them very shortly. I don't know if there's any repetition in here. I do notice that down on May 12th we have great black people. I know we talked about the black people in the session we had last year. So we, if we have a duplication, we'll just move ahead. Our schedule will be very flexible as always. Something else comes up that we want to see, we can just interrupt, show it, and then proceed from there. I'm ordering a series of videos. There's 2 videos, 1 hour long each. And it's a spiritual heritage tour of the United States Capitol. This captured my interest because David Barton, the director of Wall Builders, gives you a tour of the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., showing you all the monuments, the statues, the pictures that are there that will proclaim the fact that our nation is and will always be a Christian nation. And I thought that would be good. There is a book that goes along with this set of videos. I'm not sure whether it's just a book or what, showing the picture in the, or whatever, in the history of it or what. I'm going to order the book as well. Let you know. But other than that, there's no other workbook for any of these. If for some reason you don't like my choice of what we're going to do, that's good. We'll let you do it next year. Question. Comes up oftentimes. Do you remember what you were doing September the 9th? September the 11th in 2001. This question oftentimes is asked, and it wasn't asked me this year, maybe that's why I forgot. But what were you doing when you first heard about the terrorist attack in New York City? And what happened in Pennsylvania and in Washington, D.C.? What were you doing? I can remember we were crossing the 31st Street Bridge bringing her back from the doctors. And as we were going, Ruth called us and said, "Did you hear?" And Ruth was the first one that reported to us what was going on. And I think we became, like many, many other citizens, of our great nation and began to be glued to our television set as we watch the events unfold. Thank God for the many heroes that went into those areas and tried to save as many lives as they could. And many of them lost their own lives. I was proud of the American people right after that. You couldn't drive through the streets of Chesapeake, Ohio without seeing flag after flag after flag after flag. Churches where people were coming to church that normally don't come because they want to really trust in God of what might take place in the next couple of days. And I saw such a rise of patriotism. My heart rejoiced because I thought to myself, is this going to be the time that we see a great revival take place in our land? Is this the time that we're going to see our country turn back to the very principles upon which we were founded? And it wasn't very long till the flags disappeared. The pews in the churches became empty. And people forgot. And people forgot. A couple of years ago, my family took a tour to Gettysburg. And on the way back from Gettysburg, we stopped in a place in Pennsylvania where the airplane went down. And I'm proud of my son because he really asked some tough questions to the guard that was there. And the guard soon trying to get rid of Steve because he was asking too many questions. But there's a monument that they have built in Pennsylvania in honor of all those who lost their lives when that airplane crashed there. And I think the question still remains that whether our nation shot that plane down to protect our capital or whether the people in the plane caused it to crash. I don't think that's ever going to be answered properly. However, people were coming and it was a very crowded place. Ruth and I didn't feel like walking up to the place where they had the monument built. We saw the basic location there, and then we walked back to the car. And I'm going to have to tell you about Ruth. The person was walking with a dog. And big sign says, no dogs beyond this point. And Ruth said, I'll take care of that dog for you. And it was a beautiful dog, very friendly. She went up, and about an hour later she came back, and we had a good conversation with her. But I want you to think, did you remember 9/11 this year? Did you happen to think back over what happened, what could happen? I could not help but think of several passages of the scripture that occurred to me. This morning, I want to seek answers. I want to seek solutions. And I want us to look to what the Bible tells us that we need to do as a people in order to be able to bring our nation back to its knees. And I have an expression that I used to kneel to pray. No, I pray to kneel. It used to be when I was able to get up in the pulpit and be able to stand there, that when it came morning time, if I had the prayer, I used to kneel by the pulpit when I prayed until I couldn't get up anymore. I don't do it now, and I wish I could. But I want us to think of what is the solution that the Bible gives to us. And one quotation keeps going through my mind. It happened about 10, 12 years ago when Ruth Graham, the wife of Billy Graham, the evangelist, made a statement that if God does not judge America for what has taken place, then he will have to apologize to Sodom and Gomorrah. I think that is a very strong statement. But I have to agree. How long will it be before God takes judgment out in America? I already heard one evangelist on television, on Channel 18 over in Ohio, that got up and preached a whole sermon on Florence, the judgment of God upon America for all the sin that's there. I don't know. It could be, but I wonder about it. But there are 3 times in the first chapter of the book of Romans, the 24th verse, the 26th verse, and the 28th verse. 3 times that God, the Bible, Paul writes and said that God gave them over to a reprobate mind. God gave them over to their evil, foul affections, and so forth. 3 times. And Paul was writing what was taking place in the Gentile world, the pagan world, up until the time of Christ. He continues in the 2nd and 3rd chapter to talk about those that were living righteously among all these pagans and how God was going to judge them. But he comes to the conclusion that all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And I can only wonder as I read these passages of Scripture, has God given our country over to people with a reprobate mind? It really bothers me when I see things like this happen. There's a parable that Jesus told that I think is very apropos in this particular time. Parable of the man who went out and sowed good seed. And while they slept, his enemy came in and sowed tares among the good seed. And after they started to sprout and to grow, there was a question come up, what are we going to do about the tares? And the owner of the land says, let them grow and don't do anything. But that's when you pull the tares up, you're going to destroy the wheat as well. He said, wait till the harvest time. And at the harvest time, we'll divide the tares and the wheat. We'll burn the tares and we'll prop it on the wheat. The idea is that God's allowing the good and the bad to grow together. And I think there is a line of demarcation between the two. That when the bad becomes so far evil, then that's when God's going to send judgment. I am mindful of the time that God brought Abraham into the promised land, Abram and Sarah, without the age. He showed them the land of which they was being promised to them. He said, this is your heritage, but not now. For the evil of the people that live there now has not reached its critical point. Now that's a very, very, very liberal application. Is God doing the same today? Doing the same today? There are several things that come to my mind. I want to share this with you. I'm watching the time very closely. In the parable of the wheat and the tares, Jesus makes a statement, while man slept. I think I've told you before about my root Winkle experience time, where I got so busy making a living for my family. At one time, I was putting in 60, 70 hours a week in a CPA firm. I was preaching part-time at churches. I was working in a gas station for a friend to help him out. I was the treasurer of House and Mills Christian Assembly. I was treasurer of Cuyahoga Evangelistic Association. I also did secretarial work for both of those organizations. And I had that little time for anything else. The only thing I regret about that particular time, it took me away from my family. That's why Steve's good and not bad. Because we were raised him, not me. And when I came back and started to look around and see what happened, I was shocked. I was shocked at the immorality. It was though I was asleep and I wasn't aware of what was taking place. I can remember back when I first began to preach about homosexuality from the pulpit, when I started to emphasize the evils of abortion, and I can go on and on. I can remember some of the older people in the churches. Preacher, we don't talk about those things. That's hush-hush. My answer to those people has always been, we might talk about it, but the schools are talking to our kids about it. And that's why we're having problems where I said it's time the church spoke up against those things. And I fully believe we should. 3 passages of Scripture come to mind about waking out of sleep. In Ephesians, Romans 13, verses 11 and 12. And then, by the way, this is begins with the idea of giving support and praying for your governments. Give the support that you can for them regardless. And we need to remember that the Roman government was far more worse than what we are. They had their orgies, they had their drunken feasts, they had, but in that particular passage of Scripture, in that know in the time that it is high time to awake out of sleep, for now is our salvation nearer than when we believed. The night is far spent. The day is at hand. Let us therefore cast off the works of darkness, and let us put on the armor of light. Well, I think this ought to be shouted from the rooftops in our land today. I think we ought to go to Washington, D.C. and stand on the building where the Senate and the representatives meet and shout these words. And let them know that the division that has taken place between the Democrats and Republicans and so forth is only doing harm to our country. And we need to take a stand for what is right. Ephesians, the 5th chapter, verses 14 through 17. Wherefore he saith, awake, thou that sleep, arise from the dead, and Christ shall give thee light. See then ye walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time, because the days are evil. Wherefore be ye not unwise, but understanding what the will of the Lord is. Man, I think we ought to really get involved with what's going on. The answer to our ills in our land today is not what the Democrats say, it's not what the Republicans say, it's not what our president says, it's not what the ex-president says. The answer is what we hear from the pulpits. And I want to say something very, very strong. I am afraid that there are too many men in the pulpit that have been fed the lies of Satan to the point that they're beginning to believe it, and that's what they preach. I think it's time that we preach nothing but the gospel. Nothing but the gospel. And the last passage of Scripture, 1 Thessalonians, the 5th chapter, verses 4 through 8. That ye, brethren, are not of the darkness, that the day should overcome you as a thief. Ye are the children of light and the children of the day. Ye are not of light nor of the darkness. Therefore let us not sleep as do others. But let us watch and be sober. For they that sleep, sleep in the night, and they that be drunken are drunken in the night. But let us who are of the day be sober, putting on the breastplate of love, faith, and love, for a helmet the help of salvation. Each of these passages must be accepted by the church today. And I tell you, I look at my grandchildren. Of the three, only one has become a Christian. It bothers me. I look at my great-grandchildren. The oldest has talked to me a little bit about being baptized. But yet she has not stepped out to be so. We're living in a day and age that the church is very critical to the answer that we need to follow. There's a picture in the book of Revelation for the 3rd chapter. In one of the letters that Jesus dictated to the churches, Laodicea. A picture that is really, I think, distorted in many ways by people forward. And in that particular, the 20th verse, it says, "Here I am," and this is to the church of Laodicea. "I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with him, and he with me." That's from the New International. It should be noted that this letter that we're quoting from was written to a church. And Jesus standing at the heart's door of a church, saying, "Here I am, I'm knocking at the door. Let me in, let me in. Let me into my own group of people." He says, "If you let me in, I will eat with you and bless you, and you will be brought back into the kingdom." We need to recognize that God can use any one of us alone or together with others in order to be able to reach the needs of our nation. Look back to 9/11. Remember what happened when it occurred originally. Let's see that rise in patriotism. Let's commit ourselves to the will of God and realize that the answer is the evangelization of our nation and bringing them back to Jesus. We're going to bring our service to a close. Softly and tenderly, Jesus is calling. If you have a decision to make, whatever that decision may be, you're invited to come as we stand and sing.